Welcome to Power Reflections, a proud member of the Duff Network where we reflect on Wabbo's most fetching work as it releases. I'm Ruben Morehouse.
And I'm Elliot Diebold.
And we are coming at you not live this time because this episode was delayed a bit. When are we recording this? We'll never tell. Ooh, spooky.
The mystery.
But normally we'd be coming at you live. We'll be back to come at you live for the next few episodes, of course. So make sure you join the Discord if you want to join the live recording. Speaking of, we have a special episode coming up.
Yeah, it's going to be our 100th episode, not this weekend, but the one after.
Hell yeah, on the 21st of November, if you're in Australia, or the 20th, if you're not. And to celebrate the occasion, we're going to be doing, rather than a discussion question this fortnight, we're going to be doing a Q&A. So you can put your questions in the discussion thread. We'll mention this at the end of the episode as well. Or just ask them to us during the live recording. And we'll be answering questions. And that'll be fun.
Yeah, so the way that we record these things on Discord, we can actually allow other people to join us for a bit. So we're going to try that in that 100th episode and let people ask their Q&A questions to us through audio during the
Yes.
episode.
If you would like to, you can ask us your questions over audio and you'll be in the episode. Whoa.
Yeah.
High tech.
So that's hopefully an extra incentive for you to join up and come check it out.
Yeah, of course you can just ask your questions via text if you want, but you know,
either or
might be fun. Might be fun. Hey Elliot, speaking of questions, I got a question for you.
Hit me.
What else should people keep an eye out for?
Smooth. Yeah, so the costume contest has just closed. We got a bunch of great submissions. So if you're a patron, keep your eye out for the votes for that. They should start not long after this episode comes out. And yeah, that'll go for about a week before we sort of show them off to the public. But if you want to get a sneak peek and help decide which one is the best costume, and help me bias it towards the other verse over these parahumans costumes that we received, become a patron to do that.
Yeah, and speaking of votes, Elliot, my vote goes towards us starting the episode. So here we go. We're talking about playing a part 15.1 and 15.2, and we got a nice new arc here, and it starts strong. We're in Verona's head, and it's a Verona and Brett scene. Hell yeah, that's what we're all hoping for.
Yeah, what a mood setter for the arc, huh?
Yeah, but luckily David is here as well, keeping the peace, kind of. Not really. I don't know. Just checking it out, I guess.
Yeah, he mostly just sits as a bit of a voyeur and then like pulls people aside to get them in line when they go out of it. But yeah, no, it's a strong opener to an arc called Playing a Part. Like really not fucking around with getting to what the arc title's about.
Yeah.
But I suppose we just got to get into just like
How
all the
fun this
shit
scene
with
is.
Brett.
Yeah.
Yeah, honestly, there were like 100 examples here that I wanted to pull out initially from like just with Brett, but I managed to trim it down to just like, was it like 5? Like quickly, first thing, Brett has this moment. He's bought like a one of those racks of like plastic water bottles, and it's just this like complete lack of recognition for something that Verona's really into. Like her eco-friendliness has been a big aspect of Verona since she came back from that trip, and he just sort of completely dismisses her concerns around like him buying these disposable plastic water bottles.
Yeah, it's a great marker of how not on the same page they are, right? I mean, like,
Yeah.
obviously Verona has been obsessed with these reusable water bottles for a few arcs now. And so having Brett just completely whiff on that is yeah, it's grim.
It's also, so the place we used to live in the US bought like these racks by the dozen as well. And the water doesn't taste as nice.
On like
That's
single-use plastic bottles.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're gross, aren't they?
Like it just, I don't know. It's funny. This sits in my head as a very, well, I was going to say American, but I guess now like North American, just like thing to do. Like just buy a pallet of water bottles. I've never seen somebody do that here in Australia. And
Having said that, though, and maybe this is going to sound really elitist, and I'm sorry if it does, our tap water is just 100% better than American tap water, though, right?
that's true. But
Like, I
that's
remember when we were living
fixable.
in in Palo Alto, the tap water there is disgusting. It's atrociously like taste wise. I don't know, like mineral composition wise or whatever what it's like, but
Yeah.
taste alone, it is gross. Whereas tap water here tastes like fresh and nice, and it's really nice.
But I wonder how much of that is what you grow up with, you know?
Mm.
Like that's probably a factor. Um,
Yeah, true.
but also like here as well, like I have a lot of friends who live like out of town, and their water supply can get really shaky because just so many pipes getting to them that sometimes you just get mud coming out of the taps. And so they all have like rainwater tanks, and the rainwater tastes delicious. So yeah, I don't know. Anyway, so this is just a pet peeve of mine. It used to drive me nuts when we were living in that place together in the US because it's just so wasteful and the water didn't even taste good.
Yeah, it's you're right. I totally agree with you.
So the next Brett thing that he does as well is like just another sort of dismissal of Verona. Is he's bought this shitty flavor of like her sweet tea or not sweet tea mixing, but like this iced tea thing. Um,
Yeah.
and, like, the thing that really bugged me about this is when she first brings it up, he was like, "Oh, maybe they sold out of the unsweet ones." And then Verona kind of questions that, and he's like, "Oh, well, maybe they just don't even get them at all because no one likes them." Like he just he's just so clearly not actually trying to argue with her, but just like saying whatever he thinks will make this conversation end. Like he's just not listening or engaging at all, and just completely changing his response based on what he thinks will just make her be quiet.
Yeah, it. You're right. It doesn't. He doesn't care, does he?
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, like, obviously that's not a revelation about VD, but you know.
I just think it's really interesting to sort of notice this stuff when we're kind of looking on in the same way David is, because it's kind of like you can just really see all these little ways that you could on the surface maybe read it as Verona being a bit whingy, but like when you really read into it, it just you see how Brett just isn't giving her input any credit.
Yeah, yeah. I guess we'll talk about how David responds to all this in a bit, huh?
Yeah. Like to touch on that and to give the tiniest amount of credit where it is due. David pulls Brett outside for a little bit, like quite quickly into all of this. And this is like the first of the David pulls someone out to kind of get them to play nice beats.
Mm.
And after Brett comes back in, the tea thing comes up again, and Brett sort of says, "We'll keep an eye out for the unsweet tea." And it's like, it's something, maybe, it's just this shred of movement in the right direction.
Yeah. It is nice, isn't it? Like he clearly has uh pulled him up on it. And on something that is like it's not like Brett being hugely shitty. It's just Brett not caring about something, right? Like
Yeah,
it's nice that David is stepping in on these minor things. It really emphasizes that David does kind of get that it's
yeah.
not one big thing that Brett is doing. It's just like lots of shittiness.
Yeah, you're right. It's really important that David manages to pick that up because I think there is a read where someone could come into this without much context with these two and think that Verona was just being kind of like a whiny, spoiled brat. And we know it's not that. And
Mm.
it's really nice to know that David knows it's not that.
Yeah, yeah. It's nice. It's nice. The thing that I dislike about it is the whole thing with Brett has always been glimmers
Yeah,
of hope
yeah.
that never pan out. So I don't know. I'm trying to not get my hopes up that Brett will stop being a piece of shit.
Yeah, Verona touches on that in a bit too. But like as another little small sign that maybe things are going to get a little bit more tolerable. A bunch of the stuff, like the food they bought, what jumped out to me about it is like they were getting new utensils. They bought like vegetables, and if you just remember to the start of the story, what defined Verona's house was that everything was just a frozen meal, like a ready to eat meal. And this time they've actually gone out and bought shit to cook. It's not something that they're heating up in the microwave. It's small improvements, maybe.
Yeah. Mm, yeah. I don't know. Yeah. We'll see. We'll see.
And then the last little thing I wanted to bring up from this is there's a moment where Brett forgets like the term active listening, which is obviously fucking hilarious. But he brings it up in the context of like actually raising a valid point about like a problem he's running into with getting help parenting Verona, which is he sort of brings up that all these classes he's going to just teach this really sort of, by the book standard, tropey stuff on parenting. And if he brings up like something weird about Verona or how she responds to all that, he says like, "Oh, I just get like blank looks and more like template advice."
Mm.
And like, I actually think this is a fair complaint by Brett. I mean, not that I really trust that if he was getting the right advice, which he probably is from his therapists and David, that he would be able to step up appropriately. But like, I think it's fair of him to like. It's basically the same criticism that Verona has labeled at some of these classes. Like, they're not going to teach him what he actually needs, and I think Verona and
Yeah.
Brett might be on the same side about that.
Yeah, I wonder. I wonder whether these classes are focused on parents who are actively way worse than Brett. You know what I mean? Like actively physically abusive
Yeah,
rather than.
yeah, and just like the idea that, there is just one way to parent, I think is just kind of missing the whole point of people. Like the
Mm.
idea that the sort of one set of advice would apply to every child is just kind of fundamentally flawed. Obviously
Yeah,
I
I
know,
guess. I mean, like the key thing is Brett doesn't listen to Verona. Brett doesn't
yeah,
care about what Verona cares about or listen to what Verona cares about, right? Like
yeah.
Brett doesn't provide for Verona, and those are all pretty basic things, I guess.
Yeah, but like I guess this class on like how to do those basics, I think like this is sort of raising the point of like that's not addressing the problem here. Like they're giving template advice which doesn't apply to this family, probably doesn't apply to a lot of them, and
Mm,
like isn't helping the problem.
mm, yeah,
So so yeah, like I mean, I just think Brett actually had a point here that these classes aren't helping him because I think even if he was better, I think they probably wouldn't be helping him that much. Like what he needs is the therapy and the David, and I mean, he's got those too, so fucking no excuses, you idiot. But like the classes, I think Verona's called them out as pointless, and I think hearing even the fact that even Brett can describe them, and I agree with him that they sound useless, kind of really sells how useless they must be.
mm, yeah, yeah. It's a fair point.
But yeah, if Brett and Verona and I are all on the same page about something, I'm going to tend to assume it's pretty set in stone that that thing is what we all think it is.
Mm. Yeah, fair. I really like that. We had the stuff with the like core verbs that Rook was talking about with Lucy, and we get a kind of similar version of that with the label stuff that David introduces to them here.
Yeah,
Um, again, I don't want to get my hopes up, but it does have VD kind of coming close to realizing how little he's got in his life and how much of a problem that is. So that was fun.
yeah. He's
But
like his self reflection skills are fucking atrocious, and
yeah.
that really gets made noticeable with the fact that he can't even think of 5 labels to describe himself.
Mm, yeah. Yeah, it's fun. It's fun stuff. Um, so yeah, David kind of gears up and gets ready to leave, and Verona switches to brutal honesty mode. She brings up the smashed art. She calls Brett a man baby, and David takes her outside to kind of cool off for a chat.
I've this moment's so great. Like it kind of comes out of nowhere. Like the 2 or 3,000 words up until this point in the chapter have just been like this slow simmering tension under the hood. Like it's all been Verona secretly moving drawers around to fuck with her dad, and them giving each other little pods. Right, they're both pushing each other's buttons a bit, and just both like it's all under the surface. And then Verona just sort of pops up here and like yanks the cap off the volcano and just casually goes ballistic, and it's fantastic.
Mm, mm, yep, it's pretty fun.
Yeah, and it's the first like instance of what this sort of chapter is really about for Verona, which is just how she's sort of done letting other people's shitty interpretations of reality have hold.
Mm.
Like she's now out to fight that shit and not let her voice or vision be ignored.
Yeah, yeah. I guess, yeah, I mean, I do like that while David is here, Verona is kind of pushing Brett's buttons a bit. Like, I think while it's not necessarily super helpful, and David does basically say, like, hey, don't antagonize him, like, it's nice for David to see it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I
That's
think she
that's
has a
kind of what,
point that if
yeah.
they played nice, if they played the part, um this whole time, like that wouldn't be fair to any of them.
Mm,
But then also, I think David's got a point that antagonizing Brett isn't helping.
mm,
But then Verona also has a point that nothing else is either. So I almost don't know where I stand on this because I kind of think both of them have a point. I think Verona's not helping and not making and not thinking long term. But Verona really also has a point that she she's sort of given up on anything helping him, and she doesn't want to think long term. And I can't really criticize that because I don't think she's wrong.
mm, yeah.
Like, I don't know, like, she kind of implies she's fully given up on Brett getting better, and, like, part of me almost went, like, is that fair on her? Like, not him, like, fuck Brett isn't owed anything at this point, but, like, does Verona owe it to herself to try and make things better here, or is that just a lost cause?
I think I do kind of think it's a long-term lost cause, but like my goal for Verona is to make sure that she can exist in this, which is the only situation that she has accessible to her right now,
Yeah,
for as safely as possible, right?
yeah.
And to that end, my gut feel is don't push his buttons too much.
Yeah, I mean, but then the thing with Brett is, he can feel like a lose lose at times because if she gives him an inch, he tries for a mile. You know, like
Mm,
if she doesn't fight back, he will just kind of sink down again.
mm.
I don't know. I feel like I could just play
But
devil's
it's
advocate for both
yeah,
sides of
it's
this.
true. But like, you know, the goal is short term, right? In my mind,
Yeah, I mean, short
and the
term is like a couple of years, but like, yeah,
well, yeah, maybe, yeah, I guess it's true.
I don't know. I do. I mean, another argument, I guess, for pushing his buttons is basically it makes him go away. Like as she says to David, like what he does is he gets pissy and then they sort of avoid each other, and then he'll bring it up like way in the future. Which
Mm,
you could argue if she just keeps pushing his buttons and he keeps giving her space, it's
mm,
not helping him, but it's giving her freedom, and that kind of feels like the Undercity sort of solution to her home life, where it's just like avoiding some of the problems and some of the long term consequences, but diving all in to get herself freedom to find herself right now.
yeah.
But the other thing that jumped out to me actually when Verona was like, "Oh, you know, he'll get pissy and then we'll avoid each other, and then eventually he'll like bring it up and yell at me for it later." I was kind of like, doesn't that also describe kind of how Verona handled the fight with Lucy in Arc 13?
Mm,
Um, I mean, it's not a completely fair comparison because there were some key differences both on her end and especially on Lucy's end. But I think it is just a little bit interesting to compare how sometimes Verona's way of handling stuff can kind of circle back around to not being as different from her dad as she might like.
yeah, yeah. I think she's not at the point where she's holding on to it and simmering for months,
Yeah,
more days or weeks. But yeah, you're right. It definitely is very true. I think the fact that Verona and Brett are similarly stubborn and like don't really process their own problems very well, like contributes to the fact that this is a toxic situation. Not to like shame Verona for it or anything because
yeah.
she's 13 years old, but like it clearly compounds this whole deal.
Yeah, obviously Lucy was like pretty bullheaded with the stuff in Arc 13, and that was kind of why it got so bad. But
Mm,
in a way, it was almost good that Lucy kind of kept insisting that she needed to talk it out because eventually Verona relented and managed to communicate it, and it's been fairly good. Things have been pretty good between them since then. Like it's still sort of a work in progress, but they sort of finally had that moment where Verona was able to open up to her, and I think part of that was because Lucy both learnt how to listen better, but she also did kind of make it a thing where Verona couldn't keep avoiding her and having and like avoid talking about it.
mm, yeah. Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
to Verona's credit, she did what Brett hasn't really been able to do, which is sort of crack and finally talk about it in a
Talk about
good
what she
way.
needs. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, Verona is clearly a better person than Brett, right?
Hot
So
takes.
thumbs up. Thumbs up. Um, so yeah, Verona gets the okay to visit Thunder Bay. David leaves, and then almost immediately so does VD when Verona says she doesn't want to eat with him.
Yeah, way to
Um,
stick it out, Brett.
Yeah, I loved the bit where they're talking about just some of the problems, and Rona's dad is apologizing, or as close as he can. But even so, he throws in things like that's it doesn't quite happen like it didn't quite happen like you describe it, but still blah blah blah.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
he just can't not get in those little digs, and it's so shitty.
Yeah, yeah, like, because I think yeah, he just it's that rewriting reality stuff that Verona, is really sort of focused on in this chapter. Like, he just has to get that in because he can't accept that that is the reality.
Mm,
Yeah, it's just incredibly shitty.
mm,
It's just such a piece of work.
yeah, he's the worst.
Um, that said, I'm really hyped for like Verona's Thunder Bay holiday. Like obviously the post Arc 13 stuff in Pale has very much been, now that we know these Kinetiers so much, we're moving them into their own arcs. But I love how they're still kind of constantly checking in with each other, and like there's gonna be little visits. Like I'm sure we'll get more things where Verona hangs out with Lucy in the Overcity. There'll be bits where
Mm,
Lucy hangs out with with Verona in the Undercity. Like they're still going to get to visit each other and do little team ups, and I'm actually really excited for this like formula for as long as it lasts, where they're their own stories, but they're also crossing over a bunch.
yeah, yeah, 100%. I loved in every chapter we're about to get to, we get a little bit of like the team dialing
Yeah,
in, and I mean, obviously, Verona being in Thunder Bay will be a bit more active of a team up, but yeah, I'm very very keen.
yeah. I also think like to dive into the Thunder Bay trip a bit more specifically. So much of Verona's nightmare thing from Arc 5 that still kind of defines a lot of how she's trying to tackle stuff or what she's trying to tackle.
Mm,
Like a big part of that was that she'd been left behind by the other two.
mm.
And so as much as she's got her own place now in the Undercity and she's kind of found a real groove there, how much is she going to kind of be upset at how well Avery is kind of going in Thunder Bay? Like, will that trigger any of this
Interesting.
nightmare related stuff?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there'll be interesting stuff to track with like how maybe this Arc 5 nightmare that's still defined her for so long will play into the Thunder Bay stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it'll be very interesting. We got some interesting discussion question answers that I think will, uh, or we got one
Yeah.
in particular that I'll talk about when we get to it that I think is a really great taste of what we might expect when Verona's in Thunder Bay.
Yeah, oh yeah, exactly. Like also getting to see her play off any other council members she runs into will be a hoot.
Mm,
There's also a little snippet here as we get into the part that's actually worse than having Brett on screen. Just before that, like Peckersnot shows up and Verona and him basically kind of like organize how she's going to actually pay him for his services. And it's this really like nice breath, like in between the Brett and Edith stuff. The story does give us this little bit of like, here's a nice thing where these two are building each other up and valuing both of each other's services, and it's very nice.
mm, yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah. um, so Verona is preparing to head to the Undercity, and she spots Edith harassing Matt on the way, and steps in and tells her to fuck off.
Oh, good fucking well, Edith pisses me off so much right
Oh
now.
my
Like this
god, isn't
this
she the
segment,
worst?
I was actually reading this and I was like, can we go back to Brett? Like fucking hell, Edith. The bit where she says that John knew what he was doing when he like went into the context. Like, go fuck yourself.
Mm, yeah, he's really sorry. She's really fucked. The yeah, the John. Yeah, God, like Edith absolving herself of guilt by mentioning John walking into the contest eyes open is just like it's insane.
Yeah, it just begins to scratch the surface of her own delusions. Like you think Brett is bad, like the fucking reality that Edith is living in is just absurd.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
that one line from the very first chapter of Pact just keeps springing into my head every time.
I knew
Every time I
exactly
think
which
about
one
her
you
here.
meant when I read
Yeah.
that as well, which I thought was funny. Yeah, yeah. Festering.
Oh yeah, exactly. But to save like the more explicit Edith and Brett comparisons for when Matt gives his speech in a bit.
Mm,
Um, I also wanted to highlight, obviously, like we've talked a lot about how Edith is the kind of Avery gone wrong villain,
mm,
and you can sort of really see that in just like the stalker level vibes, because the really unhealthy kind of stalking is the one where like they're living in a different reality, and I mean, that's what Edith is doing here. Like, she's just irrationally convinced that like her and Matthew can be happy and complete. It's just like he won't. He's not willing to do it. Like it's. I mean, it's complete nonsense, and quite excitingly, it's very juxtaposed by Avery next chapter in 15.2, where like Avery's very much thinking about like how both her and her partner can be good for each other. Like Edith is not thinking like Edith is just thinking about her end of the relationship and what she needs. She's just completely divorced from the reality of what Matt feels and thinks. Like that's just he just needs to stop doing that.
Mm, yeah, yeah. Yeah. I really liked the bit where Matthew absolutely loses his shit with her. Um, it was very fun. Really cathartic stuff.
I mean, it is, but also it's frustrating because it doesn't get through this like distorted reality barrier she's put around herself.
Mm.
There's the bit where he's like, "What do you think? Like, we can call our child John, and that'll make up for it, or something." And her response is like, "I think we could," and it's like, "Oh, for fuck's sake!"
Oh
Like,
yeah.
she's just, it's
She is
pointless.
so. You're right. She just lives in a fantasy world completely,
Yeah.
right?
Well, and that's the frustrating thing. She already lives in a fantasy world. She didn't need to be in this one.
Yeah. Yeah, true. Anywho, they ditch Edith, thankfully, and Verona and Matt head to the under hospital. So they give Lucy a quick call to get some clues on what it'll be like.
Yeah. So it is worth pointing out, just as we leave Edith behind, I love Verona's way of dousing her in like sweet tea, like
Yeah,
cold, wet, and very like human and artificial. Like it's a perfect little concoction to make Edith miserable.
yeah, it's good
This
shit.
this is when like that sort of toxic binding practice is actually very appropriate.
Mm,
Um, but yeah, so obviously, as like Lucy is going to get clues from Jazz, Verona and Matt have this really big talk, and I mean, obviously, I think a lot of people were anticipating that Verona and Matt would have a lot to talk about uh, post Arc 13, and I love how explicit Walbo really makes that connection here. Like it's
mm,
Matt has been super unwilling to dump on the Kenneteers, and I think that's kind of fair, but he finally decides to talk to Verona here, and he opens it with, "I feel like you're one of the only people I could tell who wouldn't make a big deal of this," which is just like that could so easily be a Verona quote.
mm. Yeah, yeah, it's a good one, isn't it? It's very much. I mean, Verona has said that exact same thing a few times to Tash and Pekasnod and all that
Yeah,
jazz, right? So, 100%. Um, yeah, I love the Matt and Verona pairing, right? Like we
yeah,
saw that similarity start to emerge, and it's really delivering in some major ways. Like both kind of bad home situations, people who can completely go all out with the practice as their way of unwinding. I mean, Matthew is effectively a human that turned into another and is now turning back into a human, right? So I think
yeah.
it's a really interesting pairing on so many levels.
Oh yeah, I think
Yeah.
Matt has that line later on where he's like, "I don't cry because I carve my eyes out. Like I think my emotions are a bit broken." And it was like,
Hmm.
again, that's like pretty much a Verona quote. She hasn't carved her eyes out, but like she's described her emotions as broken like a dozen times. Like
Yeah.
Wabo is doing his darndest to make sure that even the most casual reader picks up on what he's doing by putting these two together.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's wonderful stuff.
It's also really fun. Like there's sort of talk both in the Edith part and here about how like Matthew is kind of the Kenneteer's like magical dad.
Mm,
And I think that was a thing we used to talk about like way back in the first like 3 or 4 arcs, like when Matt and Edith used to do stuff with the Kenneteers a lot. Like he's always sort of been their magical dad, and I know that by saying he's even remotely a father figure for Lucy, like I've already committed him to death, but I think it's really important to contrast him to Brett in this chapter. Like, just again, Matt is really uncomfortable unloading on the Kenneteers. Like, he very much sees it as his responsibility to care for them, not vice versa.
mm,
But he kind of understands the position he's in. He's able to break down and actually like talk to Verona and just communicate with her in a way that like Brett just fucking never has.
mm.
Um,
Yeah.
Yeah, like as like I'd say Miss is their kind of magic mom, and Matt is the magic dad, and I don't think either of them have been perfect in those sorts of magical parenting roles. But this is kind of what separates Matt from Brett. Is Matt is willing to actually treat the Kenneteers as equals, like when the time is right.
Mm, yeah, 100%. Yeah, I think it's he is a great magic dad. We're really getting full magic family, huh? We've got
Yeah.
Matthew the magic dad. Rook is definitely the magic grandmother. Um,
Oh, see, I would have said she's the Aunt Heather.
oh yeah, 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 cool. What do you think Toady is?
Um,
Magic grandpa? Magic uncle?
yeah, he's like that weird uncle, but not in like the normal weird uncle way, like the fun
Mm,
weird uncle,
mm,
like the one who
yep.
gives you like weird gifts and is like, "Don't tell your parents," but like, "Here's that
Gives
chocolate
you,
you're not allowed," sort of
yeah,
uncle.
or like, oh, this is a toy that is illegal for sale here, but I got it from a trip to Thailand or whatever.
Yeah, yeah, exactly, exactly.
Good stuff.
I'm trying to think who else. Cherry Pop is obviously the Kerry.
Yep, the annoying younger sister. Yeah.
Yeah.
Also worth noting, uh, the relationship between Matthew and Louise that has been prophesied for so many years.
Choo choo, all
Yeah,
aboard the train.
I mean, like, is it actually happening? It's coming. Here it comes.
This will be a thing. I don't know if our mum critiques Wildbow. Like, I don't know how long it would be till they reach this point in the story because
Yeah,
at their current pace, I feel like it's like 2 years away. But
yeah,
oh fuck, it's going to be worth it. Their mum probably won't even remember that she predicted this in episode one. She'll have to get reminded by just the fandom, who's all kind of been like, "Oh my god, it's real."
mm,
I mean, like shipping of Louise and Matthew aside, this is just genuinely a good idea. And when Verona said it, I was like, "Oh, why hasn't anybody suggested that before?" Like that does just kind of make sense.
yeah. I mean, yeah.
Like, yeah, it just him living with Louise. I was like, "Oh yeah, that is another place he could go live quite easily." Um,
Mm-hmm.
Although I do really like his point here about like why he feels like he needs to hold on to the house. Like he's sort of very open about the fact that it's like if he gives that up, it's really just admitting that so much of his last decade was a lie and was nothing.
Mm,
And what I really like about that is you could kind of really say that that's what most of the others in Kennet are doing with Kennet. Like compare Matt and Verona, like specifically. uh, Verona openly says in her head when she's confronting Brett earlier, the only reason I'm in this house is because I feel obligated to stay in Kennet. Like
yeah,
without without feeling like she had to be here helping, she'd presumably be at her mom's place in Thunder Bay.
yeah, yeah.
So, like, Brett's house is really just kind of this stand-in for what Kennett is to people like Mist, to Verona and Lucy as well. Like, just this place where they can't let it go yet. And like, it hurts me to say, but maybe that's going to be part of like the realization for these characters soon. Is they're going to have to realize that Kennett shouldn't be saved, or like, it's reached the point where it's not worth saving.
Mm,
Like at a certain point, do all these guys need to pack up and go live in Thunder Bay or whatever?
mm, yeah. I mean, maybe. Again, got a prediction coming up later that will touch on this.
Yeah. I can't fathom this story without Kennett in it. But then also all the other Wildbow works I've read, I've felt the same thing about some stuff and it's just gone away. So I can't rule it
Mm,
out.
yeah.
Also Lucy like eavesdrops on this conversation with Matt, which
Mm,
like Verona seems to have known she was doing it, or at least realized after the fact. But how do you? I wish we were doing this episode live because I'd love to hear from the audience too. Like how do we feel? Like that creeped me out a little, right? Like
mm.
because I don't get the
It is a bit of an invasion, isn't it?
for Matt at least, yeah. I don't know. It didn't sit right with me, and it still doesn't.
Yeah. 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 I'm with you. Yeah. Anyway, so the gang heads inside into the hospital to start kicking some butt, and they meet and greet and beat the resident.
And, holy fuck, what a setting this hospital is too. Like holy shit, fucking the vibes of horror as they're walking through the corridors, and there's all these like just tormented patients. It's like that one episode of the Magnus Archives. I'm sure everyone knows which one I'm talking about. Both of these were equally horrifying to me.
Mm, yeah, it's very creepy. I love the resident as like,
Mm,
well, obviously a hospital has iconography of being a place of healing, and so obviously, like an abandoned hospital is like very creepy as an inversion of that, and that's 100% what this knotted hospital is, and it's very fun.
Yeah, also just like again, continuing the thing with the Undercity resident's just a fucking badass villain name.
Hmm.
It's also just like great, like like a resident in a hospital. At least here, like it's like just the step above intern. Like it's someone quite junior. So I really like that as the title for the sort of head of the hospital.
Mm.
And then obviously just like the symbolism of Verona going to the hospital in this chapter, where she spent a bunch of the conversation earlier talking about how
Avoiding
she
it.
was
Yeah.
refusing to take medication for her hand injury. I think the resident even offers to fix her hand for her, which I just loved as a bit of a slam. It almost makes me think that the Undercity keeps trying to pull her places she's meant to be going in the Overcity.
Mm.
Like we obviously saw her go to school on the first day in the Undercity. Now she's going to the hospital in the Undercity. Like, is she going to keep avoiding the
Going to
Overcity?
places that she's been
Yeah.
avoiding. Yeah.
Um, but yeah, like with the hand stuff, like there's also a moment where she gets Dish to inhabit her hand, which was just the imagery of Dish being the person who's in her hand. It was like, oh, so you don't even think this thing is going to be like not brittle? Like,
Yeah.
the imagery there is fairly self-explanatory.
Mm. Yeah.
She also actually we skipped over it right at the start of the chapter. She mentions that there's a possibility her hand is just going to be kind of fucked up like this for life, which is that was not on Guillemets' sales pitch, right?
Um, I don't remember.
I remember him saying it would like hurt her, but like a permanent hand injury is pretty fucking
No.
tall price to
Yeah, I
pay.
don't think it was. I don't remember it being permanent, but I do remember it being quite like feeling quite long term.
Okay, maybe I'm just misremembering, but like that makes what Verona did even stupider, I guess.
Oh yeah, totally it was. It was a desperation play, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Um, so there's this other moment as well where Verona has this contract lady kind of at, knife point or whatever you want to call it. And it's pretty clear to the lady and to Verona that Verona's not going to kill this person. Um, and to us as the audience. And then suddenly Matthew just sends the Doom at her and the Doom kills her. And it's
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
it's
that sums
brutal,
it
but
up.
it's like, it's nice. Matthew says he doesn't want her to live with that, and that's just good on you, Matthew. You're a nice dude, aren't you?
Yeah, I mean, I'd love it if Matthew didn't have to live with it, but I suppose that this contract other was really going out of their way to give them no choice but to kill her.
Mm,
Yeah, I admire, like, he was talking earlier about how he needed to try and pay Verona back for being able to for him being able to emotionally unload on her, and I guess this is his way of starting to do that. I don't know if
Which
it's the best way, but it's
he
not the
does make
worst.
it feel a bit more transactional than I think it should feel.
Yeah, sure. I mean, yeah. I guess I'm just saying, like, he in general feels like the sentiment he expresses earlier on in that is that he does need to step up more and try to be more of their dad, not somebody that's leaning on them. And this is
Mm,
kind of the first time he's able to do that. Like, this is him kind of getting to save Verona from something.
mm,
I mean, Verona herself is really interesting in this fight. Like, obviously, for starters, she just fucking kicks ass. Like, she's terrifying. She uses that rasp thing to fucking skin a ghoul, and then she salts it. Which, holy shit!
yeah, brutal.
Um, and I love how she's like, yeah, salting a skinned person would hurt normally, but also it's a ghoul, so it hurts them on a
Yeah,
spiritual level too. So Jesus Christ, Verona.
yeah, they're really unloading here, aren't they?
Um, well, yeah, she's throwing spell cuts down, and just like she's an absolute badass. So like, mission accomplished.
Hmm.
But there's a few little moments, like obviously the brutality scares me a little bit. But there's also at these moments like she throws down one of her like air suction things, like her Zahir boxes that she really loves at the moment. And that's just kind of a shitty teamwork play because she doesn't give Matt any warning. I'm assuming Peckersnot and Tashlet are kind of used to this by now, and as she says, Tashlet doesn't really need to breathe air, so Tashlet's fine and actually kind of springs into action. But
Yeah.
like, can you imagine being Matt and like you're like, oh yeah, Verona, you take the lead, do whatever, I'm here to learn, and she just fucking sucks all the air out of the room without like giving you any warning. Like, it's
Mm.
It reminds me of, like, the stuff where that Avery and Verona were talking about in later Arc 13, where Verona hasn't quite reached that point of her teamwork abilities where she's willing to, do the C tier plan that works better because everyone's in on it, as opposed to the A plus plan that kind of fucks over the rest of the team.
Mm, yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's the problem when you're kind of using violence, I guess, as a chance to unload, is like you just kind of get lost in the moment and there's collateral, not collateral, casualties, but chances of collateral damage, right?
But this is her opening move. Like, this is how she kicks things off. So it's
Yeah.
like she kind of immediately sets a tone of like she knows her and Tashlit can work with it,
Mm,
and there's almost just a disregard for Matt and Pekasnot's ability to contribute right at the start there. Which honestly, with Pekasnot is kind of fine. He's our scout. He's not a tank.
mm.
But with Matthew, it's very much just kind of like. I guess if they keep hanging out, he'll get better at like coping with this. But like, fuck, give the guy some warning, Like,
Yeah. Definitely.
Uh, yeah, and I mean, they sort of end this chapter then with like Verona having fucking won, stop this civil war, and just carrying out and thinking like, yeah, she's continuing to be done with people who are deluding themselves and not facing reality.
Mm,
Although quite specifically, she's also very focused on making sure people see her reality, which is like, I mean, it's just this whole Verona Undercity thing. I'm like, this is good, but also there's parts of that that are a little bit worrying to me.
mm.
Like that's starting to get a little bit dictatory, which is what kind of works in the Undercity, which is why she's doing well. But also, that's not energy I want her bringing into the Overcity too much. So, but then it's kind of working out for her at home. So, yeah, Verona continues to be. I think you're making progress, but there's parts of this that concern me.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Um, so yeah, I guess that's the end of 15.1. Next up, 15.2, we're with Avery again. Hooray. Avery is talking with Liberty before a sudden rainstorm interrupts her.
Yeah. Something I want to call out right at the start as we get into this Liberty conversation. Liberty serves as a great contrast to Janine here for me, with like the way, because 90% of what Liberty says to Avery is intentionally trying to push her buttons, push boundaries, and just like shit stir her. But with Liberty, it's not toxic at all. Whereas, like, obviously Janine's like underlying current of toxicity has been a big
Mm,
thing in these recent Avery chapters. And I just wanted to call this out as like that very small but important distinction that I definitely missed when we first met Janine, of like Liberty kind of intentionally says these things to push boundaries, but as soon as Avery kind of draws the line, Liberty respects it and kind of
yeah,
like
backs
goes around.
off.
Yeah, or not even like backs off, like just kind of deflects
Mm,
in a way that's kind of saying, "Oh, I understand, but I'm going to keep like the mood going," which also doesn't make Avery feel like she's a wet sponge or something.
mm,
Whereas something you notice with Janine later is when Avery starts to draw these lines, Janine gets very like she's giving her puppy dog looks, like trying to guilt her for drawing the line, whereas Liberty just sort of subtly accepts it and moves around it, and that's that distinction I first missed that made me think Janine wasn't quite as unhealthy as she was, and so I just thought it was worth sort of noting.
mm, yeah, yeah. Yeah, I think it's a good call. Although, I don't know, we see some more of Janine here, and we'll get to it, I suppose. We'll
Yeah,
get to
yeah,
it.
yeah.
Um, but it's worth just like pointing out. It really struck me when I was doing my second read through this chapter is like how close Avery and Liberty have got, considering where they started. Like again, just like Avery is so good at turning enemies into friends into dot dot dot. We'll get to
Yeah. I'm so bummed that we're not doing this one live. I have a poll ready for the Avery ship
that.
wars, and I'm not so sure it's going to be relevant soon.
Put
Um,
put your put your answers in the discussion thread.
what
Who
I'll
you
do,
ship?
I'm going to chuck the poll on Discord right now anyway. Then the
Yeah.
people will understand why I posted that without context when this comes out in 24 hours.
Mm,
Um, but yeah, no, you're right. Like that is just become the Avery special of like turning people into her friends. Liberty really deserves a lot of credit here too. Like she's gone. I almost just want to say like full Kenneteer with just like how much she's putting her own well being on the line to kind of parent the other kids in this school when she really is just not the person who should be doing that. She's like a 15-year-old.
mm.
But then the only other consistent adult at the school right now is Durashay, who is like, if I had to pick someone worse than a 15-year-old to be a nurturing presence, it would be her. So yeah, like Liberty's just a really good person, and I think the BHI needs to take another look at itself if its resident goblin princess is the nurturing presence in the school.
I mean, yeah, I guess. You're right.
That's a little unfair to the goblin stuff, but it's just like, with the general thing goblins have, which I think is inaccurate, but just like you think it would cause them to think about it some more.
Yeah, I mean really there should be some teachers that are taking care of this stuff.
Yeah,
Um, Anywho, uh, I want to touch on this bit where Liberty talked about goblins absorbing vibes from their surroundings because I think that's really
yeah,
interesting because like that's just something that we all do as
yeah.
humans, right? Like you know,
Yeah,
we
it's
mimic
not
those
just
around us.
goblins, Liberty.
No, exactly, and I think it's funny that Liberty kind of calls this out about the goblins, but isn't kind of self-aware enough to realize that humans do this. She has done this. She has almost certainly absorbed some goodness from Avery, and I think that's why this is here. I just think, yeah, like it's just a funny moment.
Yeah, and I think like because it's been something that the story's almost been focusing a bit more on recently, specifically with goblins. Like I remember we sort of called out very early on in the story the whole like goblins as a metaphor for kind of like youth, and
Mm,
we used to talk then about how they were being shaped based on how they were treated, and it came up again in the story. I think when Peckersnot first showed up, and we were like, oh, he's just a nice little art goblin, and the others are making him do violence, and
mm,
Verona's going to fix him and now like all those things are coming back into the fore a lot, it seems, especially through Liberty as a kind of like it seems like the story's finally definitely tackling that part of like, okay, we've established that the goblins are kind of well, I was going to say malleable, but I'll stick with Liberty's squishy.
mm,
And now the story's really kind of yeah, I guess going to start to try and take that forward, which I can't wait to see.
mm. Yeah, yeah. But yeah, so this call is interrupted by the Lord. So Avery heads to meet them, but has some brief interactions with her family first.
Yes, and we get to see Sheridan and Sheridan's cool TV show that sounds like absolute trash that I would watch the shit out of. Like it sounds like exactly the CW vomit writing that I hate myself for enjoying so much.
Yep. Um, I want to touch on this bit when Avery's doing her connection blockers, like because her mum is really trying to have a deep conversation with her and like be a parent to her and pay attention and
Yeah.
give her advice and stuff. And like Avery fully dodges it, ducks it, weaves it, connection blocks it, and ditches. And it's just kind of I don't know, it just left me with a very sad feeling of like back when she was in Kennet, her dad and the rest of her family was so chaotic that I was like, yeah, Avery, get out of there, like get a break from it. But when she's actively missing out on, I don't know, like quality family time ish, like it's sad, right? Gives me different vibes.
Yeah, I think we had a moment similar to this back when she first left for the Blue Heron Institute in like Arc 4, where her dad was really trying to check in with her about her having just come out.
Mm,
And she like dodged him to drive in with like Lucy and Verona because she didn't want to actually have that conversation. And
yeah.
it's just like it's been a bit of a recurring thing for her. She slipped through the cracks and very consistently when her parents really try to almost make up for that. She kind of dodges it, finds a practicey reason to skip it, or has one thrust upon her. Yeah, it's an unfortunate pattern for her, and particularly right now, like what her mum starts to bring up, and what is going to be a thing for the rest of this chapter. It's really this chapter's theme is like Avery has taken on a lot of jobs. She's juggling a lot of balls right now,
Mm,
and she can't have all of these aspects in her life, and it just kind of looks like her biological family is not quite making the cut.
mm,
And that's, as you said, that's a shame when she's now living with the bearable half of them.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I don't know. It's just like it just gives me sad vibes, you know.
Yeah,
Yeah. Anyway.
but it's like you said, her mum was fucking trying, and Avery just wasn't in a position to let her do that. And yeah, that's a
Yeah.
sacrifice she's chosen to make, I guess.
Yeah. Um. So yeah, the Lord of Thunder Bay chats to Avery. Has called Avery here to give her a task. basically spying on council members who are potentially up to no good, including Hugh Legendre, Florin Pesh, and then two newbies, Thea and Thomas
And
Wint.
obviously,
Wint.
Deb is here. Like the Thunder Bay Ward seems to specifically time Avery's arrival to throw shade at Deb, which I enjoyed, but I worry is going to be a mistake.
Mm. Yeah, we'll see. We'll see. Again, maybe we'll get to that in the discussion question from the last fortnight, because a lot of people are worried about Deb. But let's talk about. I almost called her Narnia. Let's talk about Thea, shall we? Because
Holy
Thea's
shit!
backstory is delightful. It's so fucking ridiculous, but also ruthless. Like it's
Oh,
brutal.
it's like halfway between Narnia and like my go-to example is like A Song of Ice and Fire for that
Yeah.
kind of really violent fantasy. Like there's bits where otters are like shoving their intestines back in their guts. Like it's so wild.
Yeah. Um, Thea is clearly a character to be wary of because this is brutal, right?
Yeah, well, and especially like what really defined Thea in this world was that she was at war with her ex best friend. Which means I also wouldn't feel comfortable if, like Otis, I was close to her because she's got a history of stabbing people she's close to in the back. But I wonder if that's going to tie into like Avery and Olivia's deal. Like that was the comparison that jumped into my mind of like Thea having this big war with her ex best friend. I don't know what
Mm,
connection that would have to Olivia, but
yeah.
yeah,
Interesting. I like that. I also, uh, Otis saved them here, right?
yeah,
Again, just like Otis, maybe is chill. Like he takes on Thea as his apprentice rather than just he could totally just ditch her, right? But no,
yeah,
Otis is being chill, being a cool guy.
yeah. Or like she was aware, so you could have sold her to Bristow. Like there's
Yeah, could have
tons
done
of
all kinds
shitty
of dodgy
options.
shit. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm starting to like get on board with the people who kind of think Otis is like I guess I describe it as like heartless but not like cruel. Like cuz he doesn't actually give the vibe that he's here to rescue them. He was building his bus line and they were in the way and so he like got rid of this world and then when Thea didn't run away, he was kind of like, "Okay, well, I guess I have responsibility for you. I'm going to like help you rather than hurt you." Like so it's like that thing where he's not a good person. He didn't come here to save them, and he let that other one run away. But he's also not like vindictive and cruel enough to do anything actively terrible.
Yeah. Yeah. He's great. um,
And just I love how dramatic, like when the reveal that this was just like a little fairy world was just very like, oh yeah, of course, it's fucking high fantasy, like the drama that was being milked out of two best friends leading revolutions against each other. Like it's fucking high summer stuff, like to a T. It feels
mm,
like this is the shit Gilmay used to be into. What a nerd.
yeah. What a loser. Um, but yeah, so we also learn a bit about Tomas, but we don't really learn as much about him. We know he's some kind of an emotional manipulator, supposedly, but what we do learn
Yeah.
about him is he's clearly very willing to do horrible shit to people for money. So clearly, as much as of an asshole as some of the other members of his family.
And that's really just been the theme of everything since Arc 14 with practitioners, hasn't it? Like, I feel like the evil practitioners we saw in the first half of the story were much more like Alexander and Bristow. They were like really terrible people, but they were much more magically focused. Like Alexander was building up power at the BHI and with other practitioners. Bristow had the aware that he was, using mostly to build up more power in the magical world.
Mm,
We've really kind of it feels like we're stepping a lot more into these practitioners who are just being shit stains in the innocent world a lot more actively. Like Tomas's clients seem to mostly be innocent people,
hmm.
innocent in the capital I sense. I don't
Yes. Who knows
necessarily
who
know
they are?
about
Yeah.
the legal aspects of their lives, but yeah, like it's the same with Florin, who we'll get to in a bit. Like it was the same with Basil. Like we're getting a lot more into these practitioners who have gotten their power and their money and their status through fucking with innocence rather than just like sort of building themselves up in the magical world. And that's definitely going to be important as we're now talking about getting Charles out of, the landscape as a whole. Like, we're not just looking at Kennet and the magical world anymore. We're starting to really think about the innocents a lot more.
Mm, mm, yeah, yeah.
Also, and this guy's related to Fernanda, which is
Yes,
fun.
yeah,
I don't know if the Kennetiers are still in contact with Fernanda. They were at one point, I think.
yeah, yeah. We'll have to see. I suppose this is probably a prompt when we get to Thomas. We'll see. We'll
Yeah.
see what happens. So yeah, this task that Avery has set is clearly pretty gargantuan, right? Like,
It's a tall order.
yeah, almost all these practitioners seem to have a few years of experience on Avery at least. Like, Tomas is maybe the easiest, but he doesn't seem he still seems pretty troubling. And like the rest of them are very experienced at not being caught out on stuff like this. And because we've seen Mus's plotting, we know they're all innocent anyway, seemingly. So Avery's just kind of I don't know. She's just getting in trouble for nothing here, right?
Yeah. So yeah, assuming that we have the whole picture, and the only thing here is that Hugh and Florin were at that meeting and sort of weakly declined. Like, I still think the Thunder Bay Lord will be a bit shitty with them for not telling her.
Yeah.
But like, even if Avery figures that out, like, assuming there's nothing else, all this is going to do is help her make enemies. If she gets caught spying on
Yeah.
them, because
Which
as you say,
again,
like,
it's the exact kind of drama that Avery didn't want to get into, right?
yeah. Yeah, she was very explicitly like, "I don't want to get into the inter-council drama," and now the Thunder Bay Ward is like, "Hey, go spy on half of the council." And like as you said, Tomas feels like he's the easiest, but also if he's like a emotion slash connection manipulator, he might be way more attuned to noticing that Avery's looking at him. Yeah, there's just no way this doesn't end in disaster, right? Like, it just
Yeah. At least one of these four is going to go badly, right?
You have to think so. We also kind of get the answer here, and Avery goes on about it a bit more later, where she spells it out a little bit more. But we essentially learn in this chapter why Thunder Bay has an other for a lord,
Mm.
and it kind of seems like essentially being the Lord also includes just a bunch of shit work that is essentially the same sort of stuff the judges do. And so what they've set up in Thunder Bay is a Lord who can do that, but has, and like, I don't know how these rules work, basically allowed the council to run the other stuff that they want to. So they basically got her in as a bit of a figurehead who's like doing all the shit work they don't want, all the boring part of the politics, and then the practitioner council gets to decide who can come and go in the city, and like some of these other rules about what's allowed. It's very shitty.
Yeah, 100%.
Like we've got my understanding before we saw Thunder Bay was, oh, Lords is like a human in charge of a city, and they kind of have complete power. But Thunder Bay has been explained to us multiple times in and out of the story as like, this is what normal kind of looks like. Like, this is an
Mm.
example of normal practice. And so even in this situation, what we kind of get is the shit work that they don't want. They put an other up there just as a bit of a figurehead, get them to do the shit work, but they don't have the power that the practitioners really want.
Mm. Mm. Yeah.
I compare it to having a mayor who's in the pocket of like some local, rich magnate thing. Like, so it's like, the mayor is technically in the seat, but like as long as that rich person owns the mayor, they're kind of calling the important shots.
Yeah. The mayor, by virtue of being a relatively public figure of authority, is hamstringed in some ways, right? Like
Yeah.
in the ways that somebody who wants real power doesn't want to, you know, abide by.
Yeah. So it's just interesting that even in these places with lords, it's others being put on top, but in a very hollow way. It's not that different to what we saw with the judges.
Mm. Yeah.
I mean, it'll be interesting to see what abilities the Lord does actually have when if she loses her shit at someone.
Yeah, when push comes to shove, what's the Lord gonna do to stand up to things like Mus's heist?
Yeah. Also, we see Gilkey for a little bit here, but he keeps disappearing, and I don't understand why he doesn't want to be our friend.
Mm.
He seems cool as hell.
Yeah. Yep. Um, hopefully we'll get some proper Gilkey FaceTime soon because I'm keen for it for sure. So yeah, we jump forward in time, and Avery is meeting Ollie and Janine before school. Avery says to Ollie a brilliant summary of why, like, God, Avery just is so good at sticking up for herself now, right? Like, because Ollie's talking about
Yeah.
how Janine would be great, Avery would be great for Janine, and Avery's like, if it's fun for her and not fun for me, and if I'm good for her but she's not good for me, like, what am I getting out of it? Which is just so on point.
Yeah, it's that sort of line I don't see Arc 1 Avery drawing.
Yeah,
Um,
100%.
and I mean, because she's right. Like, obviously, we've already talked about the transactionality of some stuff here. Like, it doesn't need to be equal or whatever, but like, Avery's right. She can't live her life kind of doing charity for everyone all the time. Like, at a certain point, she needs to take care of herself. And that's that line she's drawing here
Yeah,
that, Edith probably wouldn't.
yeah.
What do I mean? Probably hasn't.
Yeah, for sure. Um, Now, I wanted to talk about this section with Janine because I think it actually is. I feel like a lot of people have been pretty hard on Janine because there's this section where training early morning practice is cancelled, and Janine, seemingly, apropos of nothing, decides to run all the way to school and back just in case anybody showed up and didn't get the message that practice was cancelled, so they wouldn't just kind of be wondering what's going on, right? Like that's a solid thing for her to do with no real selfish motive, right? Like I don't
Yeah.
know. I kind of like Janine. She's got a good heart. She's just kind of a goofball.
Yeah, like Janine's interesting because I think you're right. Like, I would never call her a bad person.
Mm,
Maybe just a bit of a clueless one who, when she's been hurt for reasons she doesn't understand, has maybe developed like the wrong kinds of defense mechanisms. Like, because I mean, I think it's a bit clear that she just kind of misses that she's pushing people as much as she is. Like, Avery describes her as like a dog that is bigger than she realizes, and I think that's a great comparison. It's
hmm
just then the problem is like, when Janine has been hurt by other people who were hurt by this in the past, she's like, double down on kind of being in some ways more obnoxious and just like listening even less. So she's not quite learning her lesson, but I can't really hold that against her, especially when she's like, what, 14?
mm.
I mean, I'd be lying if I said I wasn't very similar to that in a lot of ways when I was that age.
Mm, yeah, yeah. The comparison to a dog is great. There's a line from Janine later where she says, "I want to run. I want to play," which is, I mean, she is so clearly a golden retriever that has been turned into a human. Like, I'm expecting we will find that out in a few chapters. Like Florin has turned a golden retriever into a human, and that's what Janine is. Because I actually cannot imagine what else Janine is.
Yeah, her mask would be the easiest pick ever. When she inevitably joins the Kenneteers. Yeah, no, I think the dog comparison really works. Maybe she does have a bit of a streak of a bully in her. Again, I don't think it's intentional so much as just shitty mechanisms that she doesn't realize what she's doing. But maybe she's more like a chihuahua. I don't know.
Mm,
They're little shits.
yep. Yep.
Interesting though that you bring up Florin. I'm just going to jump ahead in my notes a little bit.
Mm,
Because this was a thought I had separate to these two chapters, so it doesn't really matter where I say it. Florin is something that I noticed is that everything we've seen that relates to Florin's practice in this story has been extremely human centric. Like, Bridge and McKay were impersonating humans. Liz hasn't been expressly tied to Florin's practice, but I just have to imagine she would be someone he would love to get his hands on.
mm,
She can only impersonate humans. Like, there's been a bit of a trend of when it comes to these
yeah, true.
hosts and jockeys and stuff, they're always very human specific.
Yeah, yeah.
And just some of the ways Florin talked about, I'm still hung up on that first line Florin had in 14.1, where he was like, "Wouldn't it be a shame if your familiar wasn't on your side?"
Yeah, interesting.
I'm wondering if he's going to be, because we know he's top of his game. Is his like ace up his sleeve something like this that infects others? So that's my weird tinfoil prediction, apropos of nothing.
Hmm. Yeah, cool. I like it. um, I want to also call out what Avery does this chapter, which is uh, gives all her potential partners the Snowdrop test, which I just thought was very funny. Like, Avery is clearly having some trouble with this decision. So needs Snowdrop's advice, so make sure to introduce Janine and Nora to Snow.
Yeah, it's so fun. It's like a great mixture of the best friend and the pet test.
Mm-hmm.
Because especially since she has Snowdrop in opossum form, which I mean, now she can't introduce either of them to Snowdrop in human form because that would have to be a conversation.
Mm.
Like, did you name your opossum after this girl? I think my favorite thing though about the Janine Snowdrop one is the subtle sub conversation Snowdrop and Avery are having throughout all this. Like
Mm-hmm.
Avery is conversing with Janine and Ollie like out loud, but these two are sending each other like hilarious little jabs and just like shit stirring each other. Like Avery calls her a runt, and Snowdrop is like sending back messages of like, "No, you're the runt." It's just as Ollie and Janine are kind of failing the test. The whole vibe of the segment is still really positive because Snowdrop and Avery are just bantering and being best friends, like underneath it.
Yeah, yeah. I guess this is as good a time as any to raise this thing that I was thinking about when we're talking about the shipping. I I think Nora is not a good choice, and I'll tell you why, Elliot. Avery needs to consider the fact that if she's going to be having a long term relationship, there's going to be so much deception, and that's going to be incredibly painful, right?
Yeah, especially for her, she's fucking shit at it. Like,
Exactly. And therefore, Nora, who seems more like somebody that Avery would want to have a really long term relationship with, rather than Janine, who feels a bit more chaotic, I guess. Like, it just is going to cause so much pain for Avery. I just think it's just a mistake for that one reason alone.
I think it's been fine so far, but yeah, I will be shocked if it's not something that comes up. Like, if they start to get closer, there's no way not being able to properly include Snowdrop in hanging out with her, not being able to really tell her, like all that tropey magic is a secret bullshit that's been in 100 urban fantasy stories. Like, the reason
Mm,
it's so tropey is because it's kind of inescapable in a close relationship like that. So it'll have to come up at the very least, yeah.
yeah.
Um,
Anyway, speaking of Nora, Avery hangs out with Nora next, and the two start to bond.
Yeah, and I love when Avery sort of pushes Nora at all. She describes Nora as like standing there with her eyes wide. She almost looked like a robot pretending to be a person, side eyeing Avery, then looking forward, then side eyeing her again. Expression of force kind of neutral. And I was just like, fuck, that just sounds like deer in the headlights Avery, who we knew in Arc 1. Like,
Mm,
you could sort of see why Avery was immediately drawn to Nora as somebody who she could help because moments like that just scream Avery from the start of the story.
mm. Yeah, yeah, you're right. It's very it's very early story Avery. Um so yeah, Nora talks about how her style is based off of Scooby Doo, which is very fun, and apparently a reference that everyone else got immediately, and Elliot, neither you nor I had ever heard of the what are they called? The Hex Girls?
Something like that. Yeah, I went into like the Pale channel on our Discord after reading this, and there's just like 10 mentions of these hex girls, and I was like, "What? Like, how did I miss
What is
this?"
this? Yeah.
Yeah, because obviously, if you're gonna dress yourself up after a cool band from a kids show, it's got to be Little Elvis and the Truck Stoppers.
Hmm.
That's a reference. Hopefully, someone will get.
Yeah, sure. Um, anyway, yeah, good times, good reference, Walbo, love it. Nora, the name of the film you're looking for is Scooby Doo and the Witch's Ghost. Okay, just for next time.
I mean, like honestly, having Googled the Hex Girls since, like, it's a pretty solid look.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Um, so yeah, Avery goes and shapeshifts into an older woman before changing Snowdrop into a disguise too, and they go off to spy on Florin.
Yeah, and I don't know why I enjoy this so much, but the detail that Snowdrop is just fucking terrible at frisbee. It just really brightened my day both times I read this chapter. Um, like her being a non-athletic has been a pretty consistent like character trait of hers, but just like the idea that Avery like decided that her and her son should play frisbee in their disguises and just sort of forgot to accommodate for the fact that Snowdrop can't even get out like within 10 meters of her. It's just uh I don't know why that cracks me up so much. But you could just tell Snowdrop was giving it her all and just not getting anywhere close.
Yeah. Um, I also love the group call section here when they're doing the skies for snow. Like, it's just really nice to have Verona and Lucy still playing into Avery's stories, not
Mm,
just being on the sidelines. I mean, like Verona was the only one who really helped here, but it was nice that Lucy was here too.
yeah, yeah, I agree. I think, like, especially because there's that moment where Avery's, like, trying to figure out what's going on, and it's actually Snowdrop who's like, "Why don't you call the other 2?"
Mhm.
And yeah, because I remember talking right at the start of this story about how I was quite worried when we first had 3 protagonists because I was like, "Oh, I'm going to forget what's happening in each of their stories."
Mhm.
And that didn't end up being a problem because all 3 of them were really following the one story, and we were just switching whose view we were in. Whereas now, since Arc 14, we've kind of gone into a more traditional multi-character book setup, which is each one is kind of their own story and they're crisscrossing a bit.
Mm.
And I actually really like that. Like, I think if we'd started the story with this level of interaction between the 3, I would have just completely not been able to follow it. Whereas, obviously 1.8 million or whatever the fuck words in, if we start doing it then, I already have a pretty firm grasp on this world, on the characters. So, like, tracking each of them, even if we're only getting a chapter from them every like fortnight, has been really
Mm.
easy. And so I just wanted to call that out as like a cool thing that Walbo did, where he really eased us into the 3 of them together so that he could split them off like this. And then now, even though the only crossovers we get are these little moments like this, it still feels like I'm following what each of them are up to.
Yeah, yeah. I feel like we know them so well that we're very easily able to go in and out of these, you know, these stories,
Yeah.
and follow it very easily. I also love how we find out something that Florin does is just like has a pretty good understanding of technology and uses that. Like, it always makes me happy just how clueless the magical world is about technology as a whole. Like, it gives me major Ron's dad's vibe, right? Like, others, especially, seem to have almost no comprehension of technology, and also a lot of like traditional practitioners, like your mussers, etc., feel like they
Yeah.
also wouldn't. Which means Florin is like the thing that's interesting that we learn about Florin is he's able to be a really good manipulator without really using his practice, and that means that he doesn't have to worry about oversight
Yeah.
from the Lord, or like it's a really clever way of he can use magic in his innocent life to boost there, and use technology in his practitioner life, or sorry, vice versa. Yeah. Anyway, so that like neither can figure out how he's getting an edge, and it's just very clever.
Yeah, I actually, now that you've said that, I think it was like, wasn't it a whole thing with Bristow that he kept trying to get into technology, but he couldn't stick with it long enough for it to stick? Like, he was trying to get into VR at one point and then it didn't go anywhere. And then I vaguely remember that being something Clem said about him.
Mm.
But yeah, no, you're right. Like, I think, like, this makes Florin even more interesting because, yeah, what we learn here is that really he's got this power, and I'm sure his family used this gross puppeteering to get into their prominent position. But he's also really transitioned into a spot where he's keeping a lot of it through non-practice stuff. Like, he's used the practice to kind of climb the ladder, gotten a spot pretty high up on it, and now he's like using the practice as the back half. Like, really, it sounds like he's mostly an innocent, capital I, um,
Mm.
business mode, well, not business, but like, money player person thing. And that's super interesting. Like, as we sort of already talked about before Arc 13, most of the practitioners we met in this story were very much focused on their power in the magical world. And as we've moved more into Muss's side of it, we're seeing more of these practitioners. And Florin seems like the biggest case so far of these practitioners who are climbing up the ladder in the innocent world as well. And their magic is just to enhance their innocent standing.
Mm.
And particularly as we see in Avery, who is juggling a lot more of an innocent life in this new place, like, that's going to be a lot of fun. I could see like Florin offering her a scholarship to the Marine Club or something, as a way to like sucker her into some bullshit.
Yep. Yep. Very fun. It sets up a whole new sphere of weird stuff.
Yeah, and because we don't have any experience really tackling someone's benign, innocent life.
Yeah. Um, so yeah, Avery goes back to hanging out with Nora and puts her through the opossum test, and Nora seems to do pretty well.
Yeah. This is where it feels like the shipping pole might be done for as of next week,
Mm,
because this chapter definitely kind of seems to seal things for Nora, at least for now. I still stand by what I kind of mentioned in our reflecting episode with Speed Chuck, that like starting a relationship with someone who you kind of feel you see your old self in and you're trying to save,
mm,
it, you know, is something to watch for. I think this chapter does a pretty solid job of kind of giving us evidence that there's a lot more to
yes,
this relationship to that.
yes.
Sorry, than that. So like, it's not like this giant red flag, but it's definitely something. If I was Avery, I'd want to keep in just like in the back of my mind, just like making sure that there's a lot more to, particularly how Avery sees Nora than just being somebody who she's trying to bring out of her shell.
Mm.
And I think with the drum stuff, we're getting there. But like, just
Yeah,
yeah,
it raises an interesting question, which is like, what does Avery want to get out of these relationships, prospective relationships, right? She
yeah.
obviously raised this with Janine, but like, what does she want? What does she want? We don't, I feel like we don't really know what she wants out of a relationship other than being in a relationship, which I don't know if that's enough.
Yeah, well, that was sort of her big thing at the end of Arc 12, wasn't it? Where she had that night where she sat down after confronting Pam and was like, "Oh, I haven't been thinking about relationships." She basically had that thing where she pivoted away from being Edith.
Mm,
And I guess yeah, this is the next step is now figuring out what does one that she wants looks like. That
mm,
sentence got away from me, but I mean, part of that procedure might just be entering some of these relationships and seeing what works and what doesn't.
mm,
Like especially when she's like 14 years old, like get in a relationship with Nora, and if it doesn't work out, I trust Avery to not have it end explosively badly. And she might learn a lesson from it that she can take forward.
yeah, yeah. It is pretty funny that Avery's using Snowdrop as her as her test.
I mean, it's like, 'cause I mean, like, who else is she gonna bring for them to meet? Like, her family's out of the picture. Like, I don't think we really give a shit whether Sheridan approves.
Mm,
As much as I love Sheridan.
yeah, fair enough. Yeah. Um, so yeah, Nora takes Avery to her garage to watch her rock out on the drums, and Avery realizes that there is just too much going on, but she does manage to, you know, put the puzzle pieces together, I suppose.
Yeah, it's this really strong ending for Avery. Like, the Avery Thunder Bay plotline continues to be the one where you're like, oh, there's some hope in the world.
Hmm.
'Cause, this whole chapter has really just kind of been showing us and Avery realizing she's juggling a lot of things, and here she's able to very quickly take this step back and kind of realize that she's been forming all of these good connections, and one thing she can start to do with that is then try to, like, expand to the web and, bring Liberty and Jude together.
Mm,
And obviously, this is a story that has largely been talking about cooperation and communication. So it kind of makes sense that the Kenneteer, who's been the most focused on that for the longest time, is kind of doing the best and is the one who's in the position to say, "Oh, I can make my life easier by leaning on all these networks I'm forming."
mm, mm, yeah, yeah. Chicken. Yeah, it's nice that the web is starting to connect, right? Next, we'll have, I don't know, uh, I guess Gilame hanging out with Janine. We'll see.
I don't know if Guillemets as much on Avery's
Sure, sure, sure.
one, but aside, that's the only problem with that.
Yeah, everything else would be perfect. Yeah, I think the idea of Liberty going on a path with Jude is hilarious, and I can't wait to see it.
Oh, yeah, 100%. Like, I'm sure everyone when they read that was just like, "Oh, that's going to be fucking delightful."
Yo.
Um, Again, something else that jumped out to me is I keep saying that Jude is just a male Avery,
Mm,
and as Avery keeps reminding us, Liberty is extremely straight. So
mm,
I I'm secretly kind of hoping that Avery's playing accidental matchmaker here without kind of processing what she's doing.
mm.
I tried looking up if Jude is a redhead, but I couldn't find any confirmation on what color hair the Garricks have.
Uh, yeah, good question. I don't know.
I don't think it's been stated.
Um, yeah, we'll see, I suppose. um, but yeah, I mean, Nora felt like a real safe choice before this scene, and now she feels like a more of a cool punk rocker, and Avery's got a bit of a crush on her, so that's pretty fun.
Yeah, I agree. Like this chapter definitely left me feeling like these two. would be a pretty good match at this point. So yeah, I mean, there's that whole I don't know how much this is actually a thing, but I've definitely heard about like the goth and pastel lesbian trope, and I feel
Mm,
like Avery and Nora fit into that quite well.
yeah, yeah. That's fun. I haven't heard of that trope, but sure.
You know, like the one I've seen it talked about around the most is like in Adventure Time, like how Marceline and Princess
Oh yeah,
Bubblegum
yeah,
are a
yep,
couple.
yep, 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 yep.
Like
I
yeah,
getcha.
yeah, that sort of vibe.
Yeah, good stuff. But yeah, I mean that's the end of 15.2. Anything else you want
Yeah.
to say about this one?
I can't wait for more Florin. He's going to be a disaster.
Yeah. Um, so there's a lot of things going on at the moment. With all those things going on, we need some way to keep tabs on it all. So
Hmm.
Wappo has given us keeping tabs on Kennet, basically breaking down the major players in our story so far, at least on the Kennet side. So obviously we don't get things like the Thunder Bay Council or Avery focused here, but seems like we'll be getting that soon.
Yeah. This EM seems to imply that that one's coming, if not next week, like soon.
Mm,
Yeah, holy shit, because it's been like 2 arcs since we had a proper extra material. And holy shit, did they come back with a vengeance. Like this could have easily been 3 separate extra materials and they all would have been great anyway. Like you could have the spirit, the refresher on the council, and the first opening pages on like Verona and Lucy. Each of those could have been their own ones and it still would have been like pretty solid extra materials. This one, all of them together is just fucking insane.
yeah, there's a lot in here, huh?
And it's so beautiful, like visually, like it's got these great like Wiccan document vibes, like the blacks and the light browns. And we get all this cool art, like of Lucy's earring.
Mm,
All the groups in the Undercity get their own like symbols. Like there's so much in this. It's crazy.
yeah, yeah, there's a lot here. Um, there is a lot in here. I think a lot of it is stuff that we kind of already know, so we'll probably focus on the stuff that is new-ish.
Yeah.
But
Well,
yeah,
because we used to have these sorts of extra materials that were like check-in ones. Like remember in arc, I think at the end of arc 1 at the start of arc 2, we got like here are all the Ken and others
mm,
sort of things, like these extra
yes,
materials that were just kind of like, oh,
this is a
here's all this
reference for
stuff.
you for later.
Yeah, exactly. Like here's a handy guide. And it's been a while since we got one of those. And as we already sort of talked about, the story is kind of split up into 3 almost separate stories. So it's really kind of
Mm,
handy to have one of these right now as the story kind of grows outwards like that. And especially like I think in arc 14, especially we were jumping a few days ahead every chapter. So it's kind of nice to get this one document that can serve as a bit of a like, oh, how is so and so doing with so and so? Like, oh, I can just go to that part where Verona listed all of her connections and annotated how she felt about every person she's got a relationship with.
mm, yeah, yeah. There's a lot of yeah, the family tree stuff has a lot of stuff in it that I don't know. I read through it
Yeah.
all, but I was kind of like, I don't know if any of this is going to be relevant.
It's that sort of stuff where it's like really cool details. Like I love
Yeah.
all the stuff. Like it tells you who's dead, who's alive. Like there's all these little details in there that it's just hard to talk about in this podcast format. But like just the amount of little details you learn that we can't really call out today in the podcast. But like things like learning that Lucy's surname is a hybrid of her father and mother's surnames.
Mm,
Just like stuff like that, which I didn't know that was a thing, but people have been telling me that that is something that happens in real life. So that's cool.
mm,
I didn't know that was a thing people did.
yeah. Yeah. Let's talk about some of the uh, Undercity folks because the two that are moderately new to us here are the foreman and the family man. I'm pretty sure we heard about the foreman before, and I think we
Yeah,
probably heard the family man about him in passing. But they're both pretty new and they're both pretty
yeah.
horrifying.
We don't really know anything about them.
No. I really love the idea of the foreman as like a engineer or inventor who makes magical shit. I think that's
Yeah.
wonderful and potentially useful if Toadie's planning his market soon. It feels like it's a really nice natural integration.
Yes,
Um,
but we've also heard this guy is like racist, sexist, all the
yes,
bad ists.
yes,
And Verona explicitly, Verona says we don't like him, but he's not enough trouble for now. So she just says, "We will evict him later," which I was like, "Oh, Jesus
Yep.
Christ, Verona, like, just write Chekhov's gun." Like, fuck's yeah, I'm sure it'll be that easy.
Yeah. Um, and then we've got the family man who is horrifying, so that's fun.
Yeah, well, especially because he's in the Undercity and it's Verona, you can just sort of immediately be like, "Oh, this guy's gonna suck."
Hmm.
Like, my guess is that he's got his family sort of very under his thumb, just because I was trying to think about if Verona had to face a guy with 100 kids that are rapidly growing up, what is the worst thing he could be? And I think controlling is the answer.
Mm,
So that's my guess.
yeah.
Yeah, something that jumped out to me as well because we get to see where these guys' domain on a map. Each of these new leaders of a territory in the Undercity actually reflect one of Ken's like the Ken ponents. Like so McKellar, which we all remember as like the shitty steel, industry part of Ken. He was in the south, which is where the foreman is. So
Mm,
like, that's a pretty
mm,
simple, like, transition from just, like,
yeah.
McKellar was already kind of a toxic piece of shit, and the foreman is just, like, that on steroids.
I like this.
Then Annette O was, like, the one who reminded Avery of her mum, like, just the tired family woman. She lives where the family man is, so there's a sort of like,
Mm,
I think, similarly, like, Nettie, like, a drug addict, is where the Bitter Street Witch is, which
mm,
is maybe the person at this point I feel like I get the least, but if she's running some sort of drug operation that would tie into Nettie, and then KT is where the vice principal is now, so that's just sort of the youth. So they're all these kind of exaggerated and like violently twisted versions of the four Ken components that we met.
mm. I like that. Yeah,
Um,
very cool.
uh, well, the extra fun bit on top of that is there is a fifth group who gets listed, which is the stuck around. So still continue to be a force that is worth listing, but they don't have a territory or a leader or anything. And I was wondering if that makes them the Undercity's version of Kennet, like the Kennet others, like because we saw the attempt to make a fifth face to Ken of the other side, and it didn't work. And I wonder if the stuck arounds are that sort of vibe.
Mm, mm. Yeah, the stuck rounds I don't feel like I have a really good picture of. I guess we'll have to see. Like, because we keep meeting ones who break out of their labels, you know,
Yeah, yeah, I don't know.
like
It'll be interesting.
Mel? Was it Mel?
I don't think Mal was a
Mal.
stuck around.
Oh,
She was from the school. The stuck arounds are like
yeah,
the Rowan's age kids who are just like causing. I think the only ones we've met are the ones that had the innocents
like
trapped in a
the
car and then Verona
yeah.
beat the shit out of them off
Right.
screen.
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
Um,
I still don't feel like I have a good picture of the stock arounds. Like, yeah. Anyway.
no, I'm just kind of I guess if I was trying to tie them to the Kennet others in this way, it's kind of like yeah that group that is all around and isn't really affiliated with any of the big
Mm,
groups.
mm,
But, like, they're omnipresent, they're trying to, become a group and not really succeeding, but obviously the stuck arounds are doing it in, like, more toxic ways than even the Kennet others were. Um,
mm,
I don't know, so that's the connection I'm gonna stick to for now, but I'm not super confident in it, yeah.
mm.
But yeah,
Yeah.
it's really fun seeing how because especially if we assume the Undercity is kind of something to do with Liz, like the idea that the four leaders who are the ones who are being transformed, like the big thing that Verona keeps bringing up in 15.1 is that these four specifically are feeling the effects of the Undercity's like knotting a lot more. So like as they're kind of maybe coalescing or representing Liz's twisted versions of the Ken components, like I can't wait to see where that goes.
Mm, yeah. Yeah. Definitely. Um, the goblin pictures are wonderful. I don't know what more to say about that. Biscuits
No.
is obviously adorable, but I do think Doglick is my favorite. Doglick is so cute. It's wonderful.
Dogleg's got that like opossum thing going where he's just so fucking hideous it kind of swings around to being adorable again.
Yeah, yeah. Ah, good stuff. Um, we also find out about the other shrine spirits. So we find out about the ones we didn't know about. So unveiled skullbone, blushstroke, bowbreak, near scatters, fluorescence. Yeah, I mean they're all
Yeah.
pretty fun. I think blushstroke is the one that I'm the most excited to see.
Yeah, I mean it's yeah, fluorescence is also a standout to me. Actually scatters is the one that I'm willing to just put my money down now, put down a prediction. Scatters is going to be insanely clutch at some point. because
Mm.
there's specific reference made to the fact that, oh, all it can do is scatter papers. That's useless. And it's like fucking everyone's walking around with spell cards in this world. How is scattering a bunch of papers not fucking useful? So,
Yeah, true.
like, yeah, calling it now. Verona specifically will clutch out a win with scatters.
Mm.
Um,
Interesting.
yeah, no, yeah, it was great seeing these finally, like, because this is an extra material. I think we called out as like, oh, it'd be great getting an extra material to keep track of the spirits we met on the boundary because we were struggling to keep our own list.
Mm.
And yeah, Wildbow just obviously went above and beyond with that.
Mm. Mm. Yeah.
I didn't end up having the time or mental capacity to like put together a big thing about like what all these spirits kind of symbolize or whatever. But I think
Yeah.
like Mega had that thing about them being like stand-ins for kind of how you can treat different forms of crime or whatever as police.
Mm.
So I'll just put Mega Fire on blast and say that they should do
Fair enough. Sounds good to me.
it. They'll do a better
Uh,
job than I could. So yeah,
yeah.
go on, Mega, please.
um, but yeah, I mean that's the end of the extra material. Uh,
Yeah,
good
fuck, what a
stuff.
return
Loved
to
it.
form.
Yeah, I know it was very fun. Really, you felt it really helped you feel like you were falling into the world, didn't it?
Yeah, and just like I'd forgotten how cool Wildbow could make all the art. Like, yeah, just the little symbols. The color is used in a really cool way. Like the map of the Undercity, the river is red like blood. Like there's a real conservative use of color. It's just yeah.
Mm.
I hope he's not burning himself out because I can't believe he put this together in the same week where both the chapters were like 15,000 words.
Yeah, I know, right? Yeah. Um, but yeah, I mean, let's talk about some Pale predictions, shall we? Which were predictions that were left by the community in our Pale predictor form. I'm going to pull out mine first because we were kind of alluding to it before, which was
Yeah,
from Uncle Thermoscales, who talks about how they think the story will end with Kennet gone completely, meaning that everyone, or functionally gone, allowing the trio to leave. So we've already got Avery left. Verona could end up living with her mum, and Lucy will end up moving there when Kenneth's destruction kind of means finally there's nothing
yeah.
left there anymore. I like this. I think it makes a lot of sense. In fact, that's probably my biggest mark against it. Like, it's too clean of an ending, despite the fact it would be depressing. It would be too clean. I could see Verona moving to Thunder Bay with her mum. I doubt it will be that clean for Lucy. I don't know.
I Yeah, I mean, Lucy would be the interesting one, especially considering how much her mum already struggled to find a job that was decent in Kennet.
Mm.
Um, that said, maybe hopefully a bigger city would be less just like overtly racist. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, maybe this is where best friend Florin comes in. We'll get Florin to use his connections to get Lucy's mum a sick job.
Mm.
Uh,
Maybe.
yeah, I don't know. I really like this. I tend to agree that like I can't really see a way that Kenneth survives. Like, never mind its current situation, which is already unsurvivable. If we fuck over Charles, I can't see that helping. Like, I don't see Charles dying as something that will just make Kenneth like unnot. You
Mm.
know, like it's kind of like if there's like a pump on the side of the road that's spilling out water, like even if you close it off, then you've still just got water fucking everywhere. Like there's still going to be a huge mess to clean up, and I just don't see Kenneth getting out of it, even remotely similar to what it looked like at the start of the story.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. I'm so worried for Kenneth.
I've kind of mentally already given up on it. I feel terrible, but like I am already just sort of assuming that what we have at the end of the story won't be Kenneth or worth keeping.
Mm. Yeah. Pretty
Like, it could be
worrying.
something else cool, like, if they turn the Undercity into something sick,
Mm.
like, like, it just won't be Kennet. Like, it's not gonna be a town that innocent people can, like, happily be in.
Mm. Yeah. um, what prediction did you pull out, Elliot, before we get too sad thinking about Kenneth's imminent demise?
Yeah, I pulled out a prediction from Sessler,
Mm.
who basically predicts that, part of Maricica's plan was to help isolate Verona, and now Maricica is going to try and seduce her further to the dark side by giving Verona some of her otherness in exchange for some of Verona's humanity, so that they can both kind of get their wish to avoid their current categories.
Mm.
They also suggest the familiar ritual might be part of Marisica's play,
Mm.
which might be crossing the veil for me and is a little too wild. But I mean, because the connections to Marisica and Verona have obviously been quite overt for a long time. Like, she was the one Guillaume couldn't mentor, so we sort of knew Marisica had some hooks in her. And I like the idea that Marisica has Verona so figured out that she might try some sort of play like this.
Mm. Yeah. I don't know. I think Verona would have to slip a fair amount before she'd be willing to do this, right?
Yeah, I tend to agree. Honestly, the thing of it being specifically Verona or Mariska does seem maybe like a stretch, but like the idea that Mariska's got something like this cooking up
Mm.
somewhere kind of makes sense. I know we need to see Mariska again. Like we still don't know what her plan is. Like, what is she actually trying to turn into?
Mm. Yeah. Gosh knows.
I mean, speaking of like Verona working with Marisica, though, something that Avery brought up that we skipped over, Avery considers working with Musa going forward.
Mm.
Like she specifically says that her big thing that she identified as a problem in Arc 13 was that they spread themselves too thin because they were fighting witch hunters, they were fighting Musa, they were also fighting Marisica and Charles. Like she's coming at this next confrontation trying to make sure that they're only fighting one group and that they have as many other people behind them as possible.
Mm.
And one of the people she lists is like, oh, maybe we can make a deal with Musa, which I just thought was really interesting because like Arc 13, Lucy and Avery would have gawked at that idea, I think.
Mm.
Like, I think that does speak to the idea that the Kenneteers are more willing to,
To cross those
c-
lines.
yeah, to cut those deals in order to further the like overall agenda.
Mm.
Which is going to be a super interesting thread to track going forward. Like, I can't wait to see how Lucy feels about the idea of making a deal with Musa.
Mm.
Um, I can't imagine that was if she's in on that part of it. I can't believe that was an easy decision for her to make.
Mm.
But there's a chance that Avery hasn't even shared that with them. But I guess what I'm getting at is if Avery's willing to consider working with Musa, I could see the case for if Marisica approached Verona to chat, Verona trying to make the argument if we can turn Charles's biggest ally and the person who knows him the best and cut a deal with her, that would help them. Like, I mean, if you're looking for people who on their resume has killed a Carmine beast or killed a Carmine, you can't go better than Marisica right now.
Yeah. Fair enough, I suppose. She's in the business.
Yeah, yeah, she's got the best track record that we know of.
Mm.
So that could be an in, I guess, is all I'm saying. I think it would
Mm.
be very fun if Marisica approached them under the guise of being willing to cut a deal or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. I think they'll have to get pretty desperate for that, I think.
I mean, yes, but also, again, Avery is already talking about cutting deals with Mossa.
Yeah,
Like,
true. I suppose. I don't know. Yeah, no, you're right. That's true. They're already in desperation mode. Um, so yeah, thanks for leaving your predictions. If you want to leave us a prediction, you can find the link to our Pale Predictor form in the show notes down below. Now, time to revisit some discussion question answers, Elliot. We were running a discussion question about the Thunder Bay Council over the past fortnight and which council members people thought Avery should be the most concerned about. So let's dive into some of the answers, shall we?
yeah. I had a lot of fun reading through these answers. The first response we got was from Wildbow,
Mm-hmm.
who was a big smartass and said that Avery should be the most worried about herself. The thing I dislike the most about this answer is I cannot argue with that. That's a pretty good answer.
Yep. Yep. Fair enough.
And I mean, I think we saw her doing that this week. So really, this answer was foreshadowing.
Yeah, true. Wabo was letting us know what's coming up next.
Yeah.
Um, I liked. Hmm. I really liked this answer from Sengachi, who mentioned we should worry about like the Lord of Thunder Bay themselves, e.g., the fact that they feel like a lot of people are plotting against them. Like there's a lot of instability right now, and their position itself might be at risk. We might see somebody like Deb dethrone and replace them.
Yeah, because like something's going on with Deb and the Lord, right? Like we if you didn't think that already, the fact that like they were alone together, and the Lord brought Avery in to see that, and then like shooed Deb away, and she seemed pissed. Like there's something there.
Mm,
So I think Sengachi's right that I mean that would be just Avery's luck, right? Like if the Lord got dethroned and suddenly there was like whatever like the contest for a new Lord, like if it's anything like the contest for a new Carmine,
mm,
that'll be a disaster.
mm. Yeah, definitely it would be.
We got a great answer from Dancing Anatolia, who basically listed like Deb, Otis, and Anne as all people basically covered in red flags. But they also specifically called out Ashumare as like
Yes.
we still don't know why they're filled with child's bones, and that's a red flag too.
Indeed it is. Um, Side 056 called out a few, like, there's a lot of candidates for who's dangerous here, but they pulled out Thea as the real danger. And I think I agree with that because Thea is intentionally seeking to return to a fantasy world where she can murder people free, which is, yeah, very worrying. But Side
We
Zero
it
also.
basically
Mm,
sorry, we basically get told she's trying to recreate or not recreate necessarily the world she was in, but something similar. Um, and she is next in line for Otis's bus routes. So it's kind of like if
yeah.
Otis dies, presumably she's just going to pour all of that energy into creating another fantasy world for herself.
Yeah, uh, possibly becoming the brownie, the type of creature that imprisoned her originally, right?
Oh,
Um,
I like that.
yeah, so that's pretty worrying. I think something that
I
Side Zero pointed out, which I really liked, was obviously Verona's coming to Thunder Bay soon,
yeah,
and Verona and Thea are both kind of seeking to leave behind their mundane worlds. So
I
Side Zero
really like
thought
that
that
connection.
Thea could be a great, like, worst case scenario example for Verona, which I thought would be interesting, or potentially an inspiration. Who knows?
Yeah. Yeah, I could actually see Avery wanting like it would be a great way to get close time with Thea just by trying to introduce those two. Yeah, I really like the Verona Thea connection. I feel like we're gonna have to see them interact now because that's
Mm,
so good.
mm,
I think Side Zero also is on team. Florin is so obviously an evil mustachioed villain that he's actually gonna be cool.
yeah, which is
Um
definitely where I'm at as well.
I kind of like this growing sentiment of people who are so sick of being tricked by Wildbow that they're seeing like this guy is so obviously a giant manipulative villain and being like he's probably going to be great.
Yeah, exactly right.
I mean, I'm not doing that because fucking I remember in Arc 2 saying, well, I know it can't be Marisica who did it because she's too obviously the evil fairy. It could possibly just be the evil fairy who did the murder.
Mm.
And you know who it was? It was the fucking evil fairy who just did the murder. Like,
Yeah, fair.
Vice Versailles called out Nicole Scobie. I can't remember if she's Natasha or Nicole. I forget which one's the daughter and which one's the mum. But the elementalist too, as all these elementalist mothers are wont to do, was really obnoxious about their child's romantic and sexual prospects.
Mm,
And I liked Vice Versa's pick that like all of the rest of them are just kind of like this was a pretty stable place, and all of them are toxic, yes, but there was a balance. But just like this is the woman who'll probably just cross some stupid line for no reason and set shit off.
mm.
Um, I don't know if I buy it, but I like it as a theory.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, who else did I like? Oh yeah, I'm easily impressed. Uh, talking about Frankie, like
Yeah,
we've kind of forgotten about it, but Frankie is actively a confirmed pawn of Charles slash Marisica, right? Like we think that Avery defused that bomb, but we don't know that for sure.
yeah,
Plus,
like
Frankie is new to the scene, like clearly kind of unpredictable. I don't know.
yeah. If Marisica is involved, there's just absolutely no guarantee that Frankie is disposed of now that they stopped like phase one of the plan. Like
Mm,
this is Marisica. There's 10 phases.
mm,
I also, yeah, I really like the pull that just kind of alongside Avery, she's the new factor in this ecosystem. Like we've got the magical ecosystem of Thunder Bay, which is under pressure externally. Like a lot of shit is going on outside and putting pressure on it. And now you've got two new practitioners, one of them who's just kind of wildly uneducated with a lot more power than she should have, and also Frankie.
mm.
So yeah, there's reason to be concerned about what Avery and Frankie might do to this ecosystem while it's already being stressed.
Yeah, yeah. Do you have any others that you want to pull out?
So Megafire 7 is
Mm.
on the train with Florin just being incredibly evil seeming, which I'm
No
absolutely
way.
in agreement with.
Nah, Florence, chill. Florin and Otis are the two confirmed chillers.
I'm honestly I'm hopping on the Otis train of like he's a dick but not like an evil one, like just kind of a person who's tough to be around.
Mm.
Florin though, just knowing what his practice is, I just can't believe that he's not going to be a shit stain.
No, he
Um,
is chill. It's happening.
yeah,
Chill, Florin.
Megafire also brought up Hugh Legendray, which I actually really like as a pull, not just because we know he's one of the people Avery has to spy on, but just we know he's in the habit of just ruthlessly, attacking like goblins and stuff. And obviously Avery and Snowdrop are making friends with the goblins who are still around. Like, yeah, I could see them coming to a head.
Mm. Yeah, yeah. I can see it too, definitely. Um, cool. Any others? I don't think I have any others that I want to pull out. I'm just on team Florin and Otis being chill. All
I'm on Team Otis being chill. We're 50% aligned.
right, fair enough.
I love that nobody put Gilkey. Gilkey was the tinfoil I was expecting. I was
Yeah,
hoping
true.
somebody was going to submit a thesis on here's why Gilkey is actually terrifying.
Mm,
But so far everybody seems to be on team. He's all right. So
mm,
yeah, we'll see.
yeah, we will have to see. Um,
But yeah, so we're not running a discussion question per se. As we mentioned at the start of the episode, in 2 weeks, we'll be doing a Q&A and we'll be doing it during the live stream. So you have the option not just to submit a written question, but also to, be in a position to do one audio live.
mm, yeah. Of course, you can still put your Q&A questions in the discussion thread, which will be down below, or join us and, yeah, as Elliot said, do it live.
Yes, you can also follow us on Twitter at Pale Reflect Cast. We post, live reads and also announcements and
Mm-hmm.
occasionally memes.
You got a good meme to post on there, Elliot?
No,
Come on, you must have one.
I'll try and think of one. It's got to be Pale relevant to be on that account. So I'll Google for a meme and make it Pale relevant,
Good
and it'll
on
be
you.
very organic and cool.
Which meme? What meme templates are in right now, Elliot?
I was just going to Google meme.
What about do one of the ones that's like Anakin and Padme? You know the one I'm talking
Yeah,
about.
yeah,
That's a good
yeah, yeah.
meme
I do.
template. I'm sure you can find something in there.
Okay,
All
I'll
right.
I'll do that.
No,
So
no, no. Okay, 5 minute brainstorm. What's a good Anakin and Padme meme?
Uh, I mean, are we really doing this live? Like,
Yes,
is this all going to
live,
be in the episode?
unedited. I'm not editing this part. We're on the spot, Elliot.
Oh, this is why I got to stop letting you edit episodes.
Come on, Elliot. What do you got?
I mean, I feel like I need to be. We need a more specific prompt than just pale. Like,
Mm,
we need to pick a topic within there to sort of Anakin Padme eyes.
yeah,
Because what's the shtick of it? It's kind of you say something and then
yeah.
they give like, "Oh, you mean the good
You
interpretation,
mean a
right?" And then
reasonable interpretation of this
yeah,
thing, right? Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
So I mean, there's probably a bunch you could do. Like, you could do a Thea related one.
Mm. I'm struggling to think of one. This is disappointing.
I'm just with Thea, you could do, wait, so you think this is real, right? Right?
Thea. Thea is such a psychopath. Mm. Anywho, all right. Well, check out our Twitter for Elliot for this meme that Elliot has made.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be like a day old because I'm going to do it now, otherwise I'll forget. So
Yeah.
maybe you're listening to this and you're thinking, why did Elliot post that shitty Anakin meme
Shitty,
24 hours ago?
terrible meme. Yeah.
Now
And
you
now you
know.
know. If you're looking for other things to check out that are better than shitty memes, why not head to doofmedia.com where you can find a bunch of great podcasts, all the great podcasts on the Doof Media Network.
Yes, and don't forget a new exclusive show for patrons is Doof After Dark, which is just a much more casual thing where Doof hosts will record themselves talking about non-normal episode things. It's a great way for us to chill and talk about stuff we can't make episodes about with the
Mm,
audience. The newest one is actually Ruben and I.
Mhm.
We talked about Superstore and Doom Patrol at the end of last week's Power Reflections, actually. So if you didn't catch that live, you can listen to it as a patron.
Yeah. Yeah, it was quite a fun one. We talked about Doom Patrol for a long time, and it's only gotten better since we talked about it. A few
Yeah,
episodes have aired since we talked about it, and it is getting really good.
I'm very excited for the finale this week.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, go and become a patron, and while you're on Patreon, why not check out Wildbow's Patreon as well? Because he's responsible for making all this cool stuff. So give him some love,
Yeah, think about like
fiscal love.
Wildbow's like Florin, right? Like he's in this good
Mm-hmm.
position. We
Yep,
keep
yep.
giving him money, and if you stop giving him money, he's going to unleash all of his like terrible imposters and ruin your life.
Yeah, uh, exactly right. Okay, Elliot, I figured it out. Took me a little while. I've got a good
Oh,
meme. Here it
oh.
is. Um, it's an actually a good one. Uh, so picture this: top left panel. Verona is the Anakin, and Verona says, "Hi, Lucy. I'm calling you to get directions to the hospital." Top right panel, Lucy
Okay, yeah,
is
yeah.
Padme, saying, "Oh, great, for your hand, right?" Bottom left panel, Verona, no response. Bottom right panel, Lucy, right?
That's pretty good. That's pretty good.